Welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and tonight I have with you all a truly amazing guest. I have had her twice on another show, and the information she has will totally open your minds to so many new wonders. I am so excited to be able to talk with her about all the work that she does and all of her experiences. And so I am going to turn it over to my wonderful, amazing, kind guest, Barbara Lamb.
Hi, well, thank you very much, Michael. And I noticed in the wonderful graphic introduction to this program, uh, the Nazca lines and the Nazca designs. And I'm always so thrilled to see them because I did see them in person back in 1981. I was very fortunate to have a great trip to Peru in 1981. And one of the places that we went to, they were all amazing places, but the most outstanding place in my recollection is flying in a very small plane over the Nazca area and seeing the long, what looked like landing strips on top of a mountain. They just go on for miles, a whole bunch of them. And even more striking than that, of course, was seeing the big pictographs, the carvings in the earth there on the flat terrain of all kinds of creatures that we have here on Earth, like a hummingbird and a spider and a monkey and several other wonderful, huge designs actually carved right into the hard dirt earth. And then being down on ground level, we noticed that those carvings in the earth were probably about 1 foot deep. And they're perfect. I mean, there is no extra dirt around the edges of those carved designs. So it's very mysterious. I mean, how they got there in the first place. Because when you're on ground level there on this big, wide open, flat plain, you just cannot see what the design is. You have to get up way high up in an airplane and look down on that territory in order to see the full design because they are that large. And so that was 1981. And in 10 years later, in 1991, was the first year that I went to England for crop circles and did continue that work for about 27 years as well. But it's the same sort of thing. When you're looking at a crop circle, you need to be way up over it in an airplane looking down from 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet or more in order to see the whole pattern, because they too are so large that you wouldn't be able to detect what the pattern is if you're on the ground level with those particular symbols. So it seems to me like it all kind of ties in together, even though the Nazca lines were made, I don't know how long ago. I've heard different reports. Some say that it was several hundred years ago. Other reports say it was longer ago than that. I don't know if anybody really knows for sure just when those Nazca designs and the Nazca lines were made there. But it reminds me very much of each other, those two phenomena. And when I was in Nazca, in that little plane, flying over that whole area, the one thing that really made me catch my breath and feel emotionally moved. I felt teary. And that was at the side of a mountain, on the top of which are some of these long, looks like airplane landing strips. But on the side of that mountain, and it was just a very dark mountain, no trees or nothing green, just sort of brownish black earth, that there was a carving in that land, that hillside, of what looks to me like an astronaut, and yet not a human astronaut. It looked like another kind of being there with the helmet around the head and the glass plate over the eyes, and kind of a stocky, sturdy looking uniform on. And I had not expected that because I had not seen a picture of that astronaut-like figure before going there. But suddenly there it was, just looking right up at me, sitting in the airplane, looking up right into the sky. And I just suddenly felt, oh my God, here there are beings from somewhere else that must have come and made those figures and those landing strips long ago, and maybe also left a picture of some of whom did those carvings and those lines. Anyway, I will never forget my breathing in with shock and holding my breath and thinking, this is really wonderful. We are connecting here somehow between the earth, the actual land of the earth, and who knows what from out there. There was also a time on that trip, it was actually before we got to Nazca, flying from the more northern parts of Peru, but we were in a boat off the coast of Peru, the Pacific Ocean, and going out a mile or maybe a few miles to the Belastras Islands, which are just absolutely covered with white guano from the birds there. And then as we were coming back in to the coastline, to the shore, we went past an island that had a steep hill in it. And on that steep hill was depicted what we would call a trident. In other words, a long line and then almost a fork-like with three prongs at the top, pointing down the coast. And it turns out that 81 miles down that coast of Peru from that island was the Nazca area with the figures and the long landing strip-like lines. So I had the sense back then, and this is before I ever even knew there was such a thing as extraterrestrial beings, but I had the sense that these beings were coming in from space and they would see this trident pointing down the coast, 81 miles to the Nazca area, and that's how they would hone in and find their way to that area, where I think these other beings from somewhere else were the ones who left the patterns in the ground and these big landing strips on top of the mountain, and a picture of one of them, this astronaut type of figure. So that was 1981. This is 2025. So that's a long time ago. But every time I think about that or talk about it, about being there at Nazca and seeing all those things as a newcomer, just fresh, not jaded with any previous information, but just a whole new thing in my awareness. And I had the conviction then that there must be beings from outer space, as we think of it, who do come to Earth sometimes and even leave reminders of their coming to Earth. So I think that's true of Nazca, and I think it's true of the crop circle phenomenon happening particularly in England, but actually all over the world, that these visitors come to our planet and leave their markings of one kind or another for us to pay attention to or not, as we wish. It seems like it's very benign. It's a gift, in my opinion, a gift to us humans, and very voluntary. You can be interested in that or not. I just happen to be one of those people who've been extremely interested in those phenomena of the crop circles and the Nazca drawings and the Nazca lines. So, isn't that a gentle way for them to let us know that they exist? You know, it doesn't demand anything of us, and not everybody is going to care about crop circles or about the Nazca drawings and the Nazca lines, but it's there for anybody who wishes to be interested in that. So I think it was after being at Nazca that I began to be aware of the work of, oh my goodness, the man who, Eric von Daniken, who had been to Nazca and had written quite a bit about the Nazca lines and the Nazca figures. And he was convinced that, yes, indeed, there are beings from space that come, or that did come, and left these wonderful markings in the earth itself, letting us know that they exist and that they do sometimes come here. So that was 1981, and it was 1991, 10 years later, that I went to England to visit my first crop circles. And it was the same year, 1991, that people started coming to me for hypnotic regression work that I was doing in order to find out the details of some of the mysterious experiences that they had been happening. And again, not everybody has encounter experiences with these other beings from space, but many, many people do. It's been estimated, the last I knew, in the late 1990s, that it was estimated by a Roper poll that there were 8 million Americans who had been having encounters with extraterrestrial beings. And that's just America, 8 million people. That's still a lot of people. But then the phenomenon of people being visited by these other beings is worldwide. So I have no idea what kind of huge number of people that might involve. I'm sure it does, but I don't have any figures on that. But we certainly know that many, many people here in this country do have these encounters with the other beings. And it turns out, with all this work I have been doing since 1991 and am continuing to do very frequently, it turns out that there are quite a number of different species of beings from space who have been and are coming to have encounters with certain humans. Now, every human has these experiences, but a remarkably large number of humans do. So, where would you like us to continue to go, Michael, on this? There's just so many different things that we could talk about.
There is, and it was kind of, in my opinion, a little funny is when you started talking about Nazca, I was like, ooh, yeah, what do you think about the astronaut lines? And then you went right to it, and I was like, okay, that one's answered.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about when you said like the trident pointing to where Nazca was, and I was like, my first thought is these people have intergalactic travel. Do they really need signage to where to go? And then I was like, well, but then I started thinking if the Nazca lines were there, maybe created possibly when, so called Pangea was in effect. And that's why they had the monkeys and everything, is because we were one landmass. When we broke apart, when you arrive, you're going to be like, wait, the large landmass isn't there. And
Right.
go, oh, there's the trident. Okay, that's where it is now. And be able,
Yeah.
because we don't think about we're moving. So if you were here, say, 1,000 years ago, the continents aren't going to be in the same place that they
Good,
were when you were there.
good point. I never really thought of that, but depending on how long ago we're talking about, that these indications were left there in Nazca, it could very well be that this was all one big landmass, which is one of the theories, looking back to very, very ancient times, that we may have all been one big landmass, or at least one big landmass in this part of the Earth. And yeah, I
Yep.
think that trident on that island right off the coast of Peru, I don't think that that's terrifically well known about. At least any reports that I have seen of Nazca have not mentioned that trident, but I think it's very significant that you see this trident figure carved into that hillside on that island. Um, that was probably a few 100 feet long and maybe even 1,000 feet long. So uh, it definitely is something that would be noticed if somebody was coming in from space. They and got within, oh well, let's see, 2 or 3 or 4,000 feet from the ocean and the land right there. They would definitely notice that trident, and it, I would think, would have been sort of a welcoming symbol to somebody coming from space, really pointing the direction to the Nazca area where all of these airstrips and so forth and the figures were carved. So, and who knows how long ago. Now, when we were there at Nazca in 1981, I was with a group of people, with a leader, and we were able to have a visit with a woman from Germany originally named Maria Reich. And we went to her home, which was on the flat land where all of these wonderful figures were carved, and had a nice visit with her for 2 or 3 hours. And she was telling about her research into the whole Nazca area. She was basically an archaeologist, so she was coming from that point of view. And as I remember that meeting with her for 3 hours or so, I do not remember any mention about extraterrestrial beings or anybody from space coming and making the figures and making the airstrips. And even at that time, which was 10 years before I ever became involved in working with people who had had extraterrestrial contact, even then I thought, she's doing some wonderful, wonderful work. She was very highly respected, and she was the authority at that time, the authority on Nazca. And but even then, I can remember sitting in her living room and thinking, she's done some wonderful work, and I really respect her, but I don't think she's telling the whole picture. I think there's much, much more to this than she is mentioning. And I just remember, and I didn't know exactly what more there was because, as I said, I was not aware of extraterrestrial beings in any other way, but it just seems so clear to me that these were not made by people. They were made by someone else, maybe a very different kind of someone else who really seemed to be coming to this planet from somewhere else. And all of these many years later, I still have that point of view. And I'm always open to new things being found out from people who do various kinds of research. So I could change my opinion on that. But so far, all of these years, I do have the feeling that they were done by visitations from someone else out in space.
I agree. And one of the big things is like we were talking about the astronaut. If they were made like 300 years ago, like they say at least, we didn't have astronauts then. So how would they know what they looked like to make?
That's right. And that sort of globe thing, head covering,
Right.
looks like a helmet sort of thing with probably a glass window over the, or glass like anyway, over the face. And then the whole suit too is it's just more of a bulky looking suit than
Right. It's like what our astronauts look like on the moon. They're in these big, bulky, bouncing objects. But
right.
and the other thing I was gonna point out was is a theory of why she may have been holding back, like you were saying, getting that feeling. Is we have to remember in the 80s and 90s, still, is if you mentioned the word UFO, they automatically would be like, "Oh, you're discredited. You're just gone off the deep end." And so she probably was trying to keep in her scholarly titles and keeping
Right.
everybody from thinking she's nuts and going, yes, these were created by something out here, but it's not ETs because in those days, yeah, you mentioned ETs and science automatically went the other way.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, back in 1981, that could very well have been the case. It probably was. And she was a professional person, professional archaeologist in good standing. And uh, of course, she wanted to remain in good standing. So it could be that even if she'd had some private theories about these having been done by somebody else from somewhere else in space, uh, you've got a good point that maybe she didn't mention that because, you know, she
Didn't
wanted
feel
to be respected and believed. She was quite an elderly woman at that time, and I imagine she's not with us any longer. So now, wherever she is in consciousness, in the spirit realm, it would be wonderful, it'd be interesting to know what her point of view is now about the Nautical Lines. I'm sure that when any of us finish this physical lifetime that we're in now and go on into another dimension, another realm in which we allegedly are very, very conscious and very aware of so much more than we're aware of now, and very aware of what's going on here on Earth, too, if we want to put our focus on that, our attention on it. So it would be really nice. Maybe I should try to find a medium who would be in touch with her now and, see what her perspective is. I know that wonderful Dr. John Mack of Harvard University, I knew him quite well, and I guided him around crop circles in England for 10 days, just a couple of months before he was run over and killed. And he actually came back to me through a medium, and we talked for about 45 minutes. And that was in the fall of 2004, because he was killed right near the end of September in 2004. And, having had so many conversations with him on our England trip, and, I felt I knew him quite well, and which was absolutely wonderful in itself. But when he talked through the medium to me, I said, what about the other beings, the extraterrestrial beings? Are you aware of them where you are now, meaning the spirit realm? And he said, yes, I am aware of them. And it's not exactly the way that we had thought it was. Now, he didn't really elaborate on that, but I had been wondering, and still am wondering, whether extraterrestrial beings from other civilizations, other planets, other areas of space, that do they, when they die, do they go into the same realm that we people go to when we die, that particular dimension or spirit realm? And I had really been wondering that, and I'm still wondering that, although he said, yes, they are here, but you wouldn't be aware of that unless you're in the spirit realm and you are looking for them. But he said he had been looking for them, and yes, they are definitely there. So that's a very interesting thing to me, that most people, most humans who die and go into the spirit realm, if they had not been thinking about extraterrestrial beings in their lifetime, they wouldn't particularly be looking for them in that realm. But for those people who have died and who had been very interested in these other beings, they probably will see the souls of those other beings. So I personally, having done so many regressions to people who've had encounters with those beings here on Earth, a few thousand regressions now to people who've had ET encounters, I am very, very interested. So I imagine that when I am in that realm, I will be one of those people looking out for them, and maybe even having contact with them, maybe getting to know more about them. And if that's the case, if I'm fortunate enough to do that, I hope that there's a way that I can, through a medium or whatever, get the information back to those people on Earth who are very interested in that also. And of
Yeah,
course, we have to realize not many people, I mean, certainly not everybody, that's for sure, is interested in this. But there are a lot of people who are.
yeah.
I mean, hundreds, thousands, probably millions of people, especially worldwide, who are very interested and would like to know more, as I would like to know more.
And I think you're missing an option from when you go to the spirit world, joining them. Instead of looking for them, you're instantly with them and joining them.
Ah, good point. Yes, I have the impression from other people who've spoken back from that realm that you just, including my own father, who died and came to me one night when I was sitting on top of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. That's a whole story in itself. Uh, but anyway, he said, you just think about where you want to be, and instantly you're there. There's not even a gap of an instant. You just think, I want to be in Cairo, and suddenly you're in Cairo. And, or it's that way, because he was talking about in the spirit realm, his experience was that he had always loved to travel on the earth when he was here in life. And he still, in the afterlife, loved to travel, loved to explore, like to see new places that he hadn't been to before. And he said, it's the most wonderful thing. I'm having such a good time because all I do is think of where I want to be, and I'm right there. There's no gap at all. It's instant creation. And he said, it's so much easier than traveling when you're on Earth in life.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no more reservations, no more passports, no more travel,
Sitting and waiting.
no more planes, airplanes, buses, trains, cars, rickshaws, whatever, which is such a slow way of going places. But here, he said, you just think about where you want to be, and you are there. Or, he said, you can slow it down. You can take your time. So, right now, he said, I was just slowly flying over North Africa, across the deserts, and looking down and seeing, oh, that must be the Sahara Desert. And then kept on going east and noticed two great big pyramid-shaped lumps on the earth. And he thought to himself, oh, I must be getting over Egypt. And he looked down and went flying slowly past the first pyramid and the second one. And on the third pyramid, he noticed some lumps on top of that pyramid. And he came closer and he saw, oh, those lumps are people. There were actually 4 people. I was one of them, having climbed the pyramid with 3 other people around 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning when it was still, of course, dark. And he came closer and he noticed, oh, one of those lumps is my little Bobby. He always called me Bobby, my little daughter. And he came really close to me. I could, in the meantime, not knowing about any of that, I suddenly, sitting there on one of the blocks on top of the Great Pyramid, I was there freezing cold and trying to meditate. We were waiting for sunrise to come up in the east, and then we would climb back down the pyramid again. And so just sitting there in silence, and I suddenly felt a really rush of warm air on my whole right side. And I said, oh, that feels good because it's so cold here. And then I realized that there was a voice coming from that feeling of warm air and slight pressure. And it was my father's voice in my head. I don't think my ears heard it, but I certainly heard it in my own head. And he was telling me that, oh, wow, he was surprised to see his little daughter sitting on top of the Great Pyramid. And he was very proud of that. He said, well, by Jove, it just goes to show you you can't keep a good girl down. And that was me he was referring to. And then he went on to talk about how he was doing all of that traveling by either thinking about where he wanted to be and he was there, or slowing it down so he could take in the details. And he said that's the way it is with everything. Everything now, everything here in that spirit realm where he was. You just think about it and you're there. So I would imagine that if you just think about seeing a certain person, boom, there you would be right there with that person. And no matter how long ago that person might have died and entered the spirit realm, and I would imagine that it would be the same with the extraterrestrials. If you wanted to see them, or maybe see a particular kind, species of extraterrestrials, or even a particular being, you would just think of that, and then there you are with that. So instant manifestation. So I think that that is something very, very interesting. Some people feel that they can do that even being in body here on Earth, that they think of something and it instantly gets manifested. Probably the rare person I'm talking about. But maybe we could all do that if we just believed that we could. You see, I think our beliefs so often get in our way of doing things that we could be doing because we don't think it's possible. But so one of the wonderful things about my doing all this regression work with people is that I have people who come who have been finding out some of these abilities that they have that they say we all have. It's just that we don't know, we don't believe that we have them. So some people, for instance, are keeping track of one synchronicity that happens to them after the other. And they kind of put that together with what they truly want, what they truly desire. It happens. Maybe it doesn't happen right in that one moment exactly that they're thinking about it. But when you set your sights on something that you really want, I don't mean necessarily a physical object, although there are those that say this principle can apply to obtaining a physical object, but more like, let's say, a writer would like to have written a book which he or she thinks is really worthy and would like to have that book read by many people, known by many people, and read by many people. And so if that writer really puts that into thought and intention, that sooner or later it will come about, that that book is finished and it's published and it's publicized and it's made available for sale, and it gets a lot of attention and many, many, many people buy that book. just as an example. So I think that there are abilities like that we have, and we don't particularly use this principle of really putting it into intent and an idea and picturing it and feeling it and believing it. And then eventually, lo and behold, it actually happens. It comes into being. So I think that we can learn a lot from beings who are in that other realm after physically dying. And I personally have not had a near death experience, but I have been very, very interested in other people who have, interested in the details of their experience. And there's a lot of agreement amongst many of those near death experience people. I think a lot of the principles of being and manifesting um, come through at least some of those reports and are along the line that I'm mentioning right now of thinking about what you want and there it is. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if it could be that way here instead of the slow way that we go through things like, let's say you have a cousin back on the East Coast and you're located in California, and you find yourself really thinking about that cousin and really, really wishing that you could get together in person. I mean, how really nice that would be, how important that would seem to you. And suppose you're really focusing on that. And suppose you have the openness too to thinking, oh yeah, maybe that can really come to being. So you do that, you have that in your mind for a while. Oh, maybe a few weeks, a few months, whatever. And then suddenly you get a call or email or text or something from that cousin saying, guess what? I'm coming to your area. I'm coming across the country to your area and let's get together. And then, of course, it happens. It gets manifested. So I think these are things that I'm personally exploring these days. And just recently, I was thinking about a friend of mine who lives up the California coast from where I am, a little bit too far just to drive and meet for lunch like we used to when I lived closer. We used to do that probably once a month for years. And now we're a little bit too far from that each other from that. But I was thinking about her, how could I arrange it for her to come down here or somehow meet her in the middle? And then lo and behold, yesterday there was a text message from this particular friend after many months of no contact at all, suggesting that we at least have a phone conversation to sort of get caught up with each other. So, I mean, a lot of those things happen, I think, probably to many people without necessarily putting it all together like, oh, yeah, with our thought, even without mentioning these things out loud, just our thought, some manifestation has happened. It is coming, our wish is coming into being. And I think there's just so much more to this, so much more that we could be exploring. And how exciting that is.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was agreeing with you, and the movie Jumper kind of popped in my head where they could jump from one spot to another. Oops. And Like he could be in Italy in the Colosseum and then jump and be in the desert of Egypt in like a flash. And thinking, if I could do that, I'd probably be the one to get in trouble because, like we're talking about NASCAR, I'd be like, yeah, I would make myself appear at NASCAR, but in the sky because that's the only way to see them. And so people would be wondering, why is this person floating in the air? What is going on? And then I'll be having everybody hunting me down to go, how are you floating in the air?
Well, great thought. Maybe you could have an out of body experience, do it astrally, astral travel. So nobody would see you uh, up in the air, but you could be there astrally looking down. Have you had any of those out of body experiences?
I have, and that's part of the reason why I'm drawn to like studying those so much is because it's like looking at it and going, yeah, I can understand how they would know this object or this creature, but this no. How did they know this?
Uh,
And I'll be honest, I never knew about the trident until you brought it up tonight. And so I'm like, wow, I'll have to look into that and be like, and it makes me wonder now, is there any other glyphs or images there that have yet to be discovered because we're not looking because we're thinking they're all in this area and we're not going to
right,
look over here because we're like, this is where they are. This is what we're going to study. And we
right.
would never think down the coastline, there's another one.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, actually, in southern Peru, at a place called Ica or Ica, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, ICA. It's a place sort of in a desert area in fairly southern Peru. I have not been there, but I hear that there's a huge collection of these Ica stones that have carvings on them. And it looks like they're carvings from very ancient times, that somehow they're incised in these boulder, the rocks that, might be like a football size, but various shapes. And they were all found along a dry riverbed. Used to be a river long ago, but now you can just go and pick them up. And there's a museum in that area. I think it's in somebody's home, and you can go and see hundreds of these stones with carvings. And the carvings look like, in so many cases, look like they are of the heads of other beings that are not humans, they're not animals, but they may be beings from some other planets. And some of them are really quite detailed and quite sophisticated. In fact, there is one or maybe more than one of these stones that is showing brain surgery that one being is doing on another one's skull, and showing a lot of detail about the brain and about the instrument. It looks like some sort of laser like instrument that's doing the brain surgery. And in fact, when people have really studied these Ica stones, they feel like these lines, drawings, depictions, um, have been made by some sort of laser equipment, digging into the stone rather than being carved in with a knife or chisel, hammer and chisel type of thing. So that's very interesting too. And apparently, those are from very, very long ago. as well. So I just love it when new things like that pop up from archaeological digs or people coming across them in one place of the earth or another, indicating that, wow, there used to be technology used here, just many, many thousands of years ago. And where did all that come from? Were those developed by humans who lived in civilizations that we don't even know about anymore because they were so long ago? Or were they done by beings who came here with their advanced technology from somewhere else? Or maybe some of both. But anytime that Graham Hancock or anybody uncovers something new, like a whole new archaeological dig where there seemed to be high technical achievement at those times, I'm really fascinated with that. I think there's so much more that has gone on in human history, way back. Like, for instance, Graham Hancock totally believes that there was some sort of advanced civilization, or more than one advanced civilization, in very, very ancient times that we don't even know about yet. And that hopefully, as archaeological work continues to be done, some remnants of some of those civilizations will be discovered, and we'll get to know more about those ancient times. So he feels convinced that there was a very highly developed, highly sophisticated, intelligent civilization way before anything that we know about yet in terms of ancient history. And I hope he will continue to do his wonderful work, and others as well, and bring that forth. So our history, as we humans see it, is very limited, really, to a certain number of thousands of years for civilization, and that's been mapped pretty well. But it may be that even before those more rudimentary groups of people, way back in time from our point of view, that even before that, there might have been extremely highly developed civilizations living here on Earth and creating the most amazing monumental structures of various kinds. So I don't know, let's just keep open and see what's going to be found out.
All right. And before I ask my next question, and I'm also looking at the time and noticing we're almost at the hour. Do you have time for a couple more questions or? Okay. Well, before I ask mine, I wanted to point out Destined for Greatness commented, "Hello, Barbara. I have your crop circle book."
Great, thank you. That's
And
Circles Revealed is the name of that, co-authored with Judith Moore, who did a lot of channeled work. The second half of that book is all her channeling from an 11th dimensional being. That's a pretty high spiritual being who gave, from that perspective, what the crop circle phenomenon is all about. And then my half of the book, the first half, is about everything that we know about crop circles from the point of view of being a human on Earth and going into them, studying them, measuring the energies and so forth. And a lot about, the history of the crop circle phenomenon and witnesses to them being made, and many, many different interesting facts that we can know about from the point of view of being here on the land. So I'm appreciative that that person is reading that book.
Yes, and so you're an amazing author, and I'm curious your thoughts of, because as we're talking about like Nazca lines and how they're creatures that they may not have seen or anything, but yet we're able to create. It popped in my head that if I'm not mistaken, it's in the island of Crete where they have an archway that has like a stegosaurus, a tyrannosaurus, and so there's like dinosaurs carved in the stone there
Wow.
with modern. And then I was like thinking, wait, if Nazca was created when we were one landmass, how come there's no glyphs of dinosaurs? And it got me wondering, like, if they're drawing spiders, monkeys, man as an astronaut, or birds, why are there no dinosaurs? And I was just curious your thought of, do you feel like maybe there is some dinosaur glyphs, or were they made after the age of the dinosaur before man really took over?
Well, I'm not aware of any ancient carvings of dinosaurs except for in Egypt, what we consider ancient Egypt. Um, there is a god figure, particularly in one of the temples along the Niles. Um, it's a crocodile god as they depicted it. So an upright creature looking like a man, but with a crocodile head. And apparently there was a period of ancient Egyptian time when that's what they worshipped, was this crocodile god. Uh, so that is the closest that I know of about ancient depictions of dinosaurs done by people. Uh, but it could be that being sort of reptilian creatures, both of them, dinosaurs, to some extent, some of them are more mammal like or were mammal like. Um, but this sort of aquatic type, the reptile type of being, was worshipped in ancient Egypt as the crocodile god. But I personally don't know of any ancient depiction of dinosaurs. So that's an interesting thing to wonder about.
Right, because it would definitely, I mean, if they're drawing in the dirt what they've seen, and even if they're ETs, you would think if you see a giant four-legged thing walking around eating, and a monkey flying through a tree, you're not going to sit there and go, yeah, let's draw the monkey because he's easier. You're going to draw everything you see. And so, yeah, it never dawned on me until we were talking tonight that, yeah, there's no like dinosaurs. And you could argue the hummingbird is a dinosaur because they're saying a lot of the dinosaurs became the birds. And
Right.
so you could theoretically argue that's the one dinosaur.
Well, it could be also that whoever did the Nazca drawings came well after the dinosaurs were here. They may not have been here at the time when those beings came here and did those drawings, that they drew whatever they were discovering here, like the hummingbird and the monkey and so forth. Um, and that when they were here, which is still long ago from our point of view, but not nearly as long ago as the dinosaurs were here. So they maybe had no view of the dinosaurs.
And an interesting thing was one day I was watching this program that the BBC put on about the different ages of dinosaurs and what they were going through, and as the dinosaurs were leaving, there was talking about the giant spider glyph. We think it's just enlarged so they could see it, but the BBC was saying there were actually spiders that were probably like a quarter to half the size of a dinosaur
Oh, really?
and shrunk down through evolution. And so I was like watching that program
And,
going, oh, thank God they shrank down, because I don't think I could live in a world where you walk outside and go, is that giant thing gonna walk by on 8 legs again? And or am I safe?
right. I'm thanking God too. That's very interesting. I had not heard that before. Yeah, well, things are changing. One thing we can count on, it's an old saying, it's not original with me, but one thing that we can count on is change, that things change. I mean, even from minute to minute and century to century and eon to eon, uh, what used to be noticed by people in some regards is not noticed now. And certainly there was a period of time, an incredibly long period of time, we have no idea how long, before there were even people here. But over the millions of years, it's been change after change after change. And we see that in certain places now because of weather and flooding that happens and drying of the land and parching of the land and so forth. Uh, Storms make a big change, and that's an evidence of quicker kind of change, but um, things are always changing.
That's true, and I wonder if one of the changes is going to be the notion. I was just thinking about this with your talking about how crop circles are very similar to the Nazca lines, and I was thinking, what do they have in common? You could say they're both art.
Yes,
And
yes.
so we say music is the universal language. Some say mathematics is the universal language. I'm wondering now, are they both wrong, and it's really art is what's the universal language, because you have the crop circles that are artistic designs that do use math. You have the Nazca lines that are art, and yes, they do have some mathematics to make the scale and everything. But yeah, it makes me wonder, is that why all of our big mysteries are artistic pieces, because they're trying to communicate with us through art, not science or music, and that's why we're missing it, is we're not looking at the art and saying, "Oh, they know us because they know this."
Uh, yeah, good point. There probably are lots of communications going on that uh, we don't think of in terms of coming from somewhere else. We think of them as coming from the human mind. And of course, a lot does come from the human mind. Uh, but there are people who claim to be presenting music that is coming from somewhere else. In other words, they composed it and maybe even wrote the lyrics, but they say, and I think they are sincere in saying it, they really mean it, that the music and the lyrics were inspired by somebody else. They got it through sort of a download coming into their awareness, or um, almost like they were channeling it, that it comes from somewhere else. I think even some of the really great classical music composers had said that I didn't compose this. This just came through me. They don't know exactly where it came from, but it wasn't their brain that came up with those compositions. I think even Mozart was one of them. I think Beethoven was as well. That it just came through them. They just happened to be the ones to be able to write it down in terms of the musical notes and musical scale. And then when it would be played by somebody else, according to those musical notes they had written down, wow, how did that happen? How did that come through me? I mean, what a thrilling thing that would be, and how dedicated those people must have been, how open and receptive those composers must have been to really take this down as it was given to them.
Yeah, especially Beethoven. I mean, when you think about today, you're like, you sitting at a desk and you're like, I couldn't compose music for the life of me. But yet, here's this guy that was blind, or not blind, but he was deaf,
Deaf.
and created this masterpieces and several masterpieces.
Oh yeah.
And we're like, and they all write it off by saying, well, he could feel the notes and everything. And I'm like, I'm sure that was part of it, but not everything generates like, I could get the piano because that's on the ground. So you would feel those notes. But when you have like a violin, a violin doesn't touch the ground. So how are you getting the feeling of that to where you could feel, and be able to tangibly say, yes, I like the way that feels. So yes, we're gonna play it that way.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting thing to think about with him is I would say, yeah, you know, how could he hear how to harmonize all of that because he would have no sense of what anything sounded like. Because if I'm not mistaken, he was born nearly deaf and then later in life became fully deaf. So it's not like he heard the notes and was like, "Yeah, this is what it feels. This feels good." Because I remember how this sounded. He didn't have that to start with.
Yes, I don't know how much he had to start with, but in any case, uh, it's absolutely astounding to me that he could pull in all of those, the sounds, the timing, the rhythm of all of those various instruments to make this incredible composition. It really is absolutely astonishing.
It is, and I've even heard stories of people who have set like digital recorders down on crop circles, and when they go to plug it into their computer, there's like music coming that's been recorded, and they're like, there was nobody there playing music, and you're in the outside, so it's not like there's a your next door neighbor's got an orchestra going.
All right.
You're in the country, so nothing's around for miles. So where's that
That's true.
music coming from?
Wow. Yeah. Another wonderful thing in my experience was that one year I was taking a small group of people to crop circles, one of my crop circle tours that I conducted. And in that one particular crop circle was a man who was a beautiful harp player, harp musician, and was a lovely, lovely experience being there with his playing the harp, and he was playing um, impromptu. In other words, he wasn't playing uh, music that he already knew. He was just sort of sitting there meditating in the crop circle, which was a lovely one, and then just sort of channeling the music. It was absolutely beautiful. And then he would take the harp, which was only about maybe 4 feet long, and he would take it by the edge and hold it up so that the wind would blow through it. And he'd take it around and face it different ways, walking around in the crop circle. So the sound, the music that came through the strings of the harp by the wind would be a little different depending on where he was and which direction he was holding the harp in. It was absolutely mesmerizing and so, so beautiful. And I wish that more people would do that. So the wind was playing the harp. And it actually it sounded like chords, and it had melody to some extent, not melodies that we had ever heard before, but just melody. The harpist name is Peter Sterling. He's a man who lives in California. I think he's still doing work with his harp. I don't know if he's still visiting crop circles. This was a number of years ago. But he's done a lot of CDs, albums of his harp music, and it's really, I think, inspired harp music. It's not harp music that he has played from music that was already composed by somebody else. It seems like each of his harp pieces of music is something that is basically channeled through him. And whether he knows where that's coming from or not, I don't know. But it's a wonderful thing that we can do that. And it certainly brings my attention to the fact that there seems to be somehow in the fabric of communication, there seems to be the sources for music and art and writing and spiritual thought and so forth that is coming through certain people. And I really admire those people who can receive this. It's there probably for all of us, and we don't receive it. But there are those rare people who do. And I think that that's a wonderful gift to all of us. And it certainly makes me think more and more about, okay, what is that source out there, it seems like, that is giving music and art and thought, inspiration. In other words, what I'm saying is that there is so much more to reality than I had ever been aware of, and probably that most of us are aware of. So I think it's probably fair to say that most humans are very aware of what's right here in the world, right here on Earth, done by people, done by animals, done by weather forces, and so forth. And all of that is true. There is all that. And that's what is easiest to focus on, what's right here. But more and more, I think, more people are becoming aware of a much larger picture, that there is so much more to reality, to existence, even existence of conscious beings than most of us have grown up knowing about. And the fact that there can be some contact in a number of different ways between that other out there, other intelligence, and us humans, I think that is really, really exciting. And that's what so much of my particular life and my explorations have been about. A really huge picture.
And I have one question that's popping in my head, and I feel like with your vast experiences with a lot of crop circles, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. And I'm sure a lot of people that are watching are probably like, "Why aren't you asking the obvious question?" And that would be is to me would be is we have reports where people have claimed they faked making a crop circle. Have you, in your studies, do you notice a difference in the energy of going, oh, this was definitely man made versus this is something that was made by someone else from somewhere else?
Yes, definitely. And that's been very, very fascinating to me. And I have come to know some of the men, young men, who actually do go out and make crop circles, the ones we call the hoaxed crop circles. And they try to pass them off as genuine crop circles. And I've been in many of those man made ones, not nearly as many as the genuine ones. The man made ones can look really nice from the air. They can look like a nicely done pattern. And I give them a lot of credit for that. That would be an extraordinary thing to be able to do in the dark of night, out there in a field with no other light, no light posts around or house lights or anything, even on moonless nights. So I think that they are very, very clever. However, if you go into a man-made crop circle, whether you know it's man-made or not, it has no change of energy, and the plants that have been stomped over with a board or a roller, garden roller, or some kind of instrument like that, that where they bend over from coming out of the ground, they break. And so each stalk, that is, breaks, that's flattened down, is broken. So it loses connection with its roots. And therefore, each one of those plants die. And they die right away. It's like they're murdered. You could actually say they are definitely killed. And so when you go into one, even the next morning, which I've done a few times, you go in the next morning and the plants don't look good. In other words, they're flattened, but they're lifeless. And if you go a few days later, after they're pushed over and stomped down, they're even more dead looking. They definitely are dead. They don't grow anymore, of course. And they just become sort of lustrous less, and they don't have any energy that registers on the various ways that we measure the energy of crop circles. We can use electrostatic voltmeters or magnetometers or microwave detectors. Those are the common three instrumental kinds of measurements. And we also can use, which I did for 27 years, use dowsing rods to detect if there's an increase in energy or any energy at all. Or as some of my friends used to use, a pendulum to see if there's any increase in energy. With a man made crop circle, there's actually no measurement, no moving of the dial on the electrostatic voltmeters or magnetometers. There's no movement at all on the dowsing rods, or they'll give a no answer. And there's no movement at all in using a pendulum. But if you go into a genuine crop circle by the unknown source, all of those instruments register very definitely that there is a whole change of energy from even just 1 foot outside the crop circle compared to the energy inside the crop circle. And in a crop circle where there is a swirled center or a swirled portion somewhere in that crop circle, the energy is even increased in a genuine crop circle. It's stronger. But if you go into a swirled center in a man made crop circle, nothing. There's no discernible response at all. And that's the way it feels to our bodies as well. Some people, I must say, are more attuned to just feeling the energy or feeling the lack of energy. But there are these measuring instruments that I have just remembered. So there's a really big difference between a man-made crop circle and a genuine crop circle. And of course, those of us who are very, very involved in the crop circle phenomenon tend to definitely prefer the ones that are genuine, made by this unknown, mysterious force, because it seems to be so gentle and so benign, and there's nothing killed, nothing dampened, even in terms of energy. And even after the harvesting has happened, which usually happens in England by about the middle of July or a little bit, August, middle of August, or a little bit later, except for the corn crop, which isn't harvested usually till about the end of September. But even after all the harvesting has been done and that whole field has been tilled, kind of turned over and aerated, waiting for the next season's planting season to begin. And even years later, in the same spot where there was a genuine crop circle, there is still energy remembering in that particular spot. So that, but with the man-made crop circle, they're tilled over, and then the new crop circle is planted in the winter. By spring, a new crop comes up, but there's no registration of any unusual energy there because there never was any unusual energy in the man-made crop circle, having been made the year before. So there really are some significant differences. And in many cases, just simply the patterns that are made by people are not as beautiful and complex as the ones made by the unknown, mysterious source. So it really is very interesting, I think, that there are man-made ones to compare to. And it just really it sort of accentuates the differences and the specialness of the mysteriously done crop circles.
That's really interesting. And one thing when you mentioned, like, they were making them at night, I think I remember reading where there was like some of them started appearing during the daytime. And so that makes it even more interesting because
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is like daytime. There's, plenty of light out. How did you not notice this something hanging around making this image appear? And so
Right.
It makes me wonder if somehow whoever's making these crop circles is freezing time, maybe, to where they can go and do what they do. But meanwhile, outside of what they're doing, time's like seems to stand still. So it's like for a second in our time could be like 4 hours of their time because
Yeah.
there is I've heard a lot of stories about how like in the spirit world there is no measurable time.
Right.
So could that be why these crop circles are appearing, but we don't ever see who's making them because the time difference from creation to finish is so short for us,
Ah.
it's so long for them.
Oh, what wonderful thinking. I really like the ideas that you ponder. Uh, One thing that we have discerned over the years is that the making of a crop circle, even a very large, complex crop circle, uh, can be made in 7 seconds of our time. So I don't know how that would translate into some other source, maybe with a whole different sense of time, as you're suggesting, uh, how that would translate there. But there is a videotape from 1996 where there was a crop circle in Wiltshire County, southern England, at a place called Oliver's Castle. Oliver's Castle is really a big hillside, like almost like a mountain. And then down below is not a building castle. And then down below that hillside was a nice, flat, beautiful wheat field. And a young man happened to be camping at night up on that hillside with his video camera right next to him. And about 4 o'clock or so in the morning, he woke up for some reason, grabbed his video camera, is wondering why he was waking up, pointed it down the hill, and caught on film the making of a lovely snowflake like crop circle. And what is shown in the video is that there were two white balls of light, kind of shining white, in the just beginning to be slightly daylight. And you could see those two balls of light coming from behind a hedge at the opposite end of the wheat field, coming across the middle of the wheat field, where there was another ball of light just spiraling around, seeming to lay down a circle. And as the other two came, these beautiful spokes, 6 spokes, came out from the center. They were being laid down with a little ring around the end. So the two balls came over the middle of the field where this was going on and around the other side of the field and behind that hedge again. And then immediately, two more balls, or maybe the same ones, we don't know, came over that middle part of the field. And the 6 spokes that had come out from the center circle being swirled extended on perfectly with another ring on each spoke, forming a beautiful pattern. Very simple, everything symmetrical, everything the same length, each spoke with each ring being identical, all 6 of them. And the crop circle was complete. And those two balls of light just simply went across the other end of the field and past that hedge again, not to be seen again. And the whole making of that crop circle, which was perfect, took 7 seconds. Absolutely incredible. So that we have on record on a videotape. It's probably on the computer now from 1996. I happened to be there when that happened and certainly was excited to, very excited when that was brought to, that video was a videotape uh, that was given to the crop circle researchers at the place where we all hung out. And wow, that's still argued about in the sense that some people say, oh, that must have been dubbed in footage. But that videotape was sent gradually to about 7 different uh, film labs and analyzed. Some were in Hollywood, some were in England, some couple were in Scotland. And each lab came back with a report saying, no, there's nothing that's been dubbed in or fake about this. This is genuine film footage. So I still go with the fact that was a real happening, the white balls of light making that crop circle. There's also a case, also in the late 1990s, of a crop circle being made right by a main road that goes through Wiltshire County, the A4. It's very trafficked. And during one late morning, a crop circle was made right on a hillside, right off that main road, right across from Silbury Hill, which is a very trafficked place, that ancient site. Now, nobody has made a report of having seen how that was made, but it must have been made in a very short period of time, or somebody driving by would have seen it and would have reported it.
Right. And what I found interesting when I was hearing the story of the first one with the two orbs was as it's traveling from the hedge to the crop circle, it doesn't leave a mark. But when
No,
it gets to the crop circle area, it starts making the marks, which shows
it's a
there's
good point.
some intelligence in that orb because
Oh, yeah,
how did it know when to start and stop what it was needing to do?
good point. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I think there's got to be some kind of really high intelligence. Also, there's another case um, in 1996 when along a big highway in Wiltshire County, just south of Stonehenge, with a lot of traffic late afternoon, going along that road, going to London or coming back from London, there suddenly was a big crop circle made just maybe 100 yards in or so from that main highway, which always has a lot of traffic at the end of the afternoon. Also, there was a pilot of a small plane, like a little commuter pilot, taking a passenger from west of that area over to a town east of that area. At 5:35 that afternoon, he flew over Stonehenge, and that pilot was aware of crop circles and was looking around just to see if there's anything interesting, any new crop circle that had appeared. And there was definitely nothing in those fields, a lot of fields around there of growing crop. He dropped off the passenger, came back at about a half an hour later. He came back about about 5 after 6. And there was a whole row of cars that had already parked along the side of the road. And he looked over and he saw there was a whole new crop circle. And it was a real beauty. It was a Julia set of fractal geometry, the first of the Julia set fractal geometry crop circles that then we had a whole series of. And there were already people who'd gotten out of the parked cars, walked the 100 yards or so into the crop circle, and were filling up that crop circle. That all happened in a 1/2 hour window of time in the daylight, late afternoon. And in the summer, it stays light until about 10 o'clock at night. So it was definitely well into daylight between 5:35 and 6:05 p.m. So it's so interesting, and yet nobody has come forth and said they had witnessed the making of that crop circle, but it obviously was made when there were probably hundreds of cars driving along that roadway, that highway.
Well, and
Right.
what's interesting too is you say when the pilot flew back, the cars were parked along the highway looking at it.
Right.
If it's at their level, how did they know it was there? How did
Well,
they see it?
that
And
that yeah, good question. That field near the cars where they were parked had a slight slope to it. So even from the level of riding in a car, they would see this pattern in the slight slope. Wasn't
okay,
wasn't like a big steep hill, but it definitely was an upward grade. So the crop circle showed to some extent from the road. It didn't show that it was a perfect fractal geometry shape, a Julia set, they call it. Um, but they could see that there was a crop circle there. And then, of course, once one or two people went into it, that attracted attention of the other drivers too. Oh, there must be a crop circle there. There's people in that slight slope over there. Oh, yeah, there it does seem to be a crop circle, even if they couldn't see the entire design. But that was a very complex crop circle, too. It not only had this big arc of circles starting bigger at the top and getting smaller and smaller, but each one of those circles had another circle coming off of it and a slightly smaller circle coming off of it. It's a beautiful pattern.
yes, and to be honest, I would love to keep talking about this, but it's getting late here, and we've actually almost been an hour and 45 minutes, and I know
Oh,
you have other things to do as well, and so I'm very
sure.
appreciative of your time. And so, where can people find you if they want to have research or talk to you about a regression, if you're still doing that, or talk to you about crop circles?
Okay, thank you. My website is a good place to go to, and that is barbaralamregression.com. Barbara Lamb, Lamb, regression.com. And on that website, it has many, many things, including some broadcasts on it. And there's a place where you can send a message to me, like sending an email, and it gets transferred over to my emails so that I can see it and answer it. Might be a little gap of time there. I find it hard to keep up with all that and do everything else I'm doing. But yes, I still am doing many, many regressions for all kinds of purposes. I'm still doing past life regressions, which I started doing in 1984. And I'm doing a lot of uh, regressions to experiences that people have had with the extraterrestrial beings or other dimensional beings. And I'm doing regressions for people who want to know from their own higher self, their own higher knowing, their soul knowing, to know what the main reason is that they have come into this lifetime. Because many people, by the time they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, or even later in some cases, that they want to know what their central purpose was, the main thing that they came into this lifetime for. And often it turns out that it's some particular kind of service to others. And when they find that out, um, then that's great. That's very reassuring to them. And they will make a point of going ahead and making sure that they do that with the remaining years that they have. So it can be very, very helpful in that particular way too. So yes, I am still very much loving to do that work and help out in that particular way. And they can find out about crop circles there too, to some extent. And although I'm doing much more of the regression work than I am currently of the crop circle work, it still follow the trend of the crop circles and still absolutely enthralled with what I'm seeing, what I think is happening, what the other beings are doing. And I'm sure it will continue to be a lifelong interest. So I want to thank you, Michael. And I think that the questions that you asked were wonderful questions, really, that really show that you've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of pondering about these things, which I
Well,
really appreciate.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. And I wanted to take a moment too and to say from my heart to you,
Mhm.
thank you for your service to humanity and to everyone during this awakening process. And thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. That's really nice. Yeah, I think this is a time of many, many, many people awakening. And, I think it's showing so clearly about all the dysfunctions that have been going on in our world, all over the world, not just in this country. Many wonderful things going on too. Um, but the more that the dysfunctions and some of the atrocities, unfortunately, are coming up, the more that we have the opportunity to know what we would like instead of the way that it is, and to wake us up to working toward those more wonderful ways of life. So it's a very significant period of time that we're going through. And of course, many, many different kinds of opinions about what's going on politically and so forth, country to country. But anyway, it's all kind of being tossed up in the air right now and being brought out into the light. A lot of the really dysfunctional things that have been going on. And hopefully, out of all of this, we will learn better as a human race to live our lives with helping each other rather than hurting each other. I dearly, dearly hope for that.
I agree. And I wonder sometimes if Shakespeare wasn't like scrying into the future sometimes because I look at his famous line of "May you live in interesting times" and going, it, "Boy, he ever forecast the age we're in now?"
He certainly did. I think the Chinese people from long ago too, ancient times, I think, uh, have a curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah,
And indeed, we are. And let's hope that we make something better out of it.
here, here.
There are wonderful things about the earth and about humanity, too. I just feel very grateful to all of that. And there definitely are some ways that we could do a whole lot better. So let's work towards that.
I agree, and I would love to have you back on to continue talking with you some more about this.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to because you're a real thinker. You're a ponderer, and I really, really respect that and appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you as well and you taking the time. And so, with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone in the chat room. Thank you to everyone watching.
Yeah,
And make it a wonderful night, day, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So,
right.
good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, Michael.